What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. I'm looking at this BART train robbery, and apparently this has been an ongoing problem for a few weeks. What made this last one notable was the sheer number of juveniles who took part. And they don't have an accurate count, and apparently because all of these perpetrators appear to be minors, photos and such are being withheld. But apparently it is a big, big problem where they're just jumping onto the trains, looting the people, and leaving. And we've lost our moral compass as a nation. What are these kids learning from their parents? Or are both parents working, forced to work, which means the kids are learning their social skills from TV and movies? And what is the public school teaching them? I mean, again, I grew up in farming country, and this is an urban area. I never saw anything like that when I was a kid. Very, very different world. Now then, we were talking about Donald Trump and his relationship with WikiLeaks, because during the campaign he was out there saying he loved WikiLeaks, and because WikiLeaks was putting out all this information that was detrimental to Hillary Clinton. And they also put out, I mean, they were being fair and objective. They also had some stuff on Bernie Sanders, not much on Trump. And Donald Trump loved it, loved WikiLeaks. He thought it was wonderful. Well, now he's the president, and he's done another 180-degree switch. CNN is reporting, citing anonymous, the usual anonymous intelligence community sources, that the Trump administration's Justice Department was seeking the arrest of Assange and had found a way to charge the WikiLeaks founder for publishing classified information without charging other media outlets such as the New York Times and Washington Post, who published the exact same information. Now think about that one for a while. When WikiLeaks publishes it, it's a crime. When the New York Slimes and the Washington Compost publish the same exact classified information, they are not going to be charged. Now, as you know, Marine Le Pen is saying that if she wins the presidency of France, she's going to grant French citizenship to Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, which I think would be a really good thing. We included on today's WhatReallyHappened.com page a link to a video of a speech by John F. Kennedy, where he talks about secrecy and it being a threat to a democracy. And you listen to that speech and you realize just how right he was, how prophetic he was. Because now we're living in a society where our lives are wide open to be spied on and surveilled, and all of our corporate executives and politicians are just hidden from view because they don't want you to see what it is they're really doing. So you ought to go back and take a look at that JFK speech. Now, Ron Paul is out there defending Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, and he says basically if you love WikiLeaks and you want to bomb it, it's the difference between the good guys and the bad guys. The bad guys, the ones with secrets to keep, are the ones who hate WikiLeaks. Of course, anytime you've got somebody engaged in a crime or a constitutional violation, they're going to be very upset when it's exposed. I mean, I went through that 23 years ago when I pointed out that Vince Foster obviously did not commit suicide. He was murdered and got my career destroyed. So that's how it works. Ron Paul continues, Assange is a hero. Going after Assange, you're declaring war on the truth. And that's a very widespread phenomenon we're seeing in our entire society, a war on the truth. They even have a name for it, the post-truth society. They're literally out there saying facts and truth don't really matter. It's what you feel. It's what you believe that matters. If you believe Russia is evil, then that's all you really need. No, I think I want to know the reality before we do something like drop bombs on other people. Now, as you mentioned before, the global spy agencies, the Five Eyes organization group, they're down in New Zealand having a little meeting. And basically, they have the representatives from the 5 participating countries: United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain. And the United States, rather. So they're basically down there, and they're having a big conference. And I imagine a big topic of that conference is how they're going to go back to being invisible to the general public. Because the Five Eyes, or Echelon program, goes all the way back to the 1980s. Think about all that time it was going on, and you did not know it existed. But now you do. And you find out that the very reason for Echelon and the Five Eyes system was so that the spies in one country could spy on the citizens of another country and then trade that information to the intelligence services of that country so they could say, we're not spying on our own people. The other country is spying on us. We're just trading them for the information. These days, they don't even really care if there are laws against spying on us. The Fourth Amendment, they don't care. Now, here's a very bizarre story, and I don't know if this is really a threat or just another boondoggle. This is out of 12160.info. And apparently, this is being reported from The Intercept, where the NSA has a 62-foot diameter airship called the Hover Hammer. And apparently, it is this blimp that was caught illegally spying on people in New York. It's got an eavesdropping device, and it flies overhead, and it spies on whatever it's designed to spy on. So, my feeling about that is it's another one of these bluffs. They want you to see the blimp. They want you to think they're spying on you. I mean, we know from the Hindenburg and the Shenandoah how easy it is to bring those airships down. And remember, during World War II, the Gestapo in Nazi Germany deliberately cultivated a public image of being able to see everything, hear everything, virtually read the minds of all the German people. And it was, of course, impossible. They didn't have the manpower, anywhere near the manpower. It was just this bluff, not to say anything, because you might be heard. The Gestapo was everywhere. They've got informants everywhere. And it was a bluff, and unfortunately the German people fell for it. Now then, WebRoot Security Tools, which is a fairly prominent company, apparently made a goof. They went berserk today, and they were mislabeling key Microsoft Windows system files as malicious and temporarily quarantining them, basically breaking the PCs in the process. And it hit home users, business editions, managed service providers. Everybody got hit by this. And apparently, WebRoot's system labeled operating system data as W32 Trojan Gen, meaning a generic Trojan-infected file. And they're trying to recover from that one. Now, there is a bit of a problem with security software, and you probably ought to be aware of it. And that is what's called a false positive. And that is where, because the cyber criminals are working to make their code, their weapons, as invisible and transparent as possible to evade detection, they're often made to look like real system files. And sometimes security software will look at real system files and falsely label them as containing malware, which is obviously what happened here with WebRoot. And it can be a real problem. So if you are using security software on your computer, and it's scanned on through and said, here are all the malwares you've got, don't just hit select all and delete. You have to make a point of going through one by one and checking them. Is this really malware, or has it hit a system file and flagged it incorrectly. One of the best ways to do that is if your security software allows you to sort by date. You look at the most recent ones, and obviously software, drivers, whatever that were installed 2 months ago can be pretty much assumed to be okay. But it is an issue, and there have been some cases where security software will have more false positives of genuine system files than they find real malware. It's like open season on computer users right now. All right. This is where things are getting a little bit bizarre. Apparently, U.S. intelligence sources announced that terrorists can now smuggle explosives into airplanes using laptops. And as a result, they're getting ready to have a ban on laptops on planes originating from Europe. Now, that means laptops in the cabin. You can have them in your checked luggage where TSA can steal them or, as they did in my case, drop and smash them. And I think this is probably going to discourage a lot of people from even traveling because they understand putting anything of value in the checked baggage is an invitation for it to not complete the trip. I remember going through Heathrow Airport in London. I lost a Walkman player. Now, the reality is, if you know anything about the inside of a laptop, there is no room in there at all. None at all. And more modern laptops don't even have a CD drive. So you don't have that empty space either. So I think it's another case of booga booga, followed by further inconveniencing of the American or of the traveling public. Now, we were talking a while ago about how the FBI was caught out running their own child porn website. And basically what it is they identified the site, they took it over, they threw the perpetrator in jail, and then they kept the website going to try and trap all the customers. And I can understand the rationale of that possible approach, but it does border on entrapment. And you also have the problem about what do you do about people who logged into that porn website for the very first time while the FBI was running it. If the FBI hadn't been running it, they wouldn't have logged in. Well, apparently, according to a story that just came out over in 12160, apparently the FBI was running 24 dark web child porn websites. And I'm starting to wonder just how much of the child porn problem is actually being generated by the government itself. We know that a lot of these so-called terror attacks that are thwarted by the FBI involve entrapment. FBI informants find some patsy. They get them all talked up about doing something about the evil United States. They give them money and weapons, and then they swoop in, make the arrest, and say, huzzah, huzzah, are we not great? And then 6 months down the road, the defendant gets cut loose because it is obviously entrapment, but they got the headlines out of it. They get the budget boost. See, we're doing good work. Don't cut our budget. And it's certainly a lot easier to entrap somebody than to actually go on out and find the real criminals. The FBI is not the swell bunch of Joes you see on movies and TV shows. They just don't. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Brian in Maryland, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Doing good.
I was just calling to talk about Jason Chauffet.
Yeah.
And him announcing that he's not going to run again next year. And I even read on one source that he might not even finish out his term this year.
Yes.
That really concerns me. He has been a shining light in our Congress and in our Oversight Committee. I'm from Maryland, and we have people in there like Elijah Cummings, and I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's almost like the male version of Maxine Waters.
That's bad.
Yeah, it seems like he just pretty much throws up the propaganda that the liberal media puts out there. And it just really worries me to see people like Jason. I don't know if he's throwing his hands up and leaving or what's up. But
well, the
really
story that I heard is that one of the earlier investigations he was in charge of turned out to be a government cover-up itself, and that he was being threatened with an investigation by his own committee of his actions. And it looks like this is definitely a political hatchet job to get rid of him, and I think next they're going to find some way to target Trey Gowdy.
I agree totally, and if they do get Trey out of there, boy, we are in trouble. And
we're already in trouble.
We have people like, yeah, you're right about that. Luckily, we do have a few people like that in Congress, and we're even more lucky to have a few people like you in the alternative media that will tell us the truth. We're very thankful for you. I've been listening to you for about a year now, and I love the work you do.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words, and it's really kind of nice to hear, because right now this is a very discouraging, disheartening time, and yeah, it's rough.
Yeah,
it's been very rough.
But I really appreciate it. It's an honor to talk to you. It's my first time calling in, and I'll let you go.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go and switch over to Jack in Louisiana. Aloha, Jack. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I got told that all these new laptops don't have the disk drive and all the plug-ins on them. But 3 weeks ago, I went and bought a HP nice laptop, a little less than $400, and by golly, it's got HDMI, all the USB outlets, and the disk drive, the CD player, and it even had a Photoshop in it.
Oh, well, good. That's a find. Absolutely, it's a find. But before we talk about explosives inside a laptop, or inside somebody's underwear, or whatever the next nonsense story is going to be, you need to understand that how powerful an explosive is not just its chemical makeup, but how it is shaped and tamped. And taking explosive and spreading it through the innards of a laptop, it's not going to get the opportunity to build a strong concussion or shock wave. It'll certainly blow the laptop apart, but probably not much of anything else around it. That's what happened with the so-called crotch bomber. It wasn't properly shaped and tamped. Getting an explosive to produce the maximum effect, that takes a lot of skill. You got to know what you're doing. And just taking an appliance and pouring explosive into it, you're not going to get a powerful result.
Yeah, all your tank rounds are shaped charge explosives, the high explosive ones.
Some are tungsten penetrators, the silver.
Yeah, well, no, tungsten went away in '82. We uploaded depleted uranium.
That's right. It's depleted uranium now. There's the so-called Hesh round. There's all kinds of different munitions, dime rounds, aerial denial rounds. But shape charges are more used on things like torpedoes, where you're going to have a good solid contact with the target.
Yeah, HEP, high explosive plastic tank shell, and HEAT, high explosive anti-tank, they were both shape charges. And I attended the secret briefing in '82 in Germany when they uploaded the DU, and they took off the tungsten. And they told us tungsten penetrates no better than the DU, and if you take one breath off the smoke of burning DU, you will get sick anywhere from 2 weeks to 20 years. Won't say in that time frame when you get sick, but you will get sick.
I actually had that happen to a colleague back in my Amiga developer days, and he'd served in the very first Iraq War, and he had been a loader on the A-10 with depleted uranium shells, and apparently he was downwind when they were used, and he did inhale a bit of the smoke, and he died of cancer. And so, yeah,
that's right.
that really
Years
did happen.
ago, I can't find it, but Time magazine had some GIs right on the front cover, and they were MPs in the first Iraq War, and they were just in the dust, and their children were coming out deformed right in Time magazine, and they checked them for DU, and they were DU hot.
Yeah, that's a big stink they're trying to keep under wraps, is the families of our returning veterans are having massive birth defects because of the DU. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Fukushima is back in the news again, especially in the news. And there are growing concerns that, in point of fact, uncontrolled nuclear chain reactions may be occurring underneath the plant. The reactors are still melting down way in the ground, and it's burned through containment. And they're now estimating that Fukushima amounts to 12 Chernobyls. They're never going to get that one cleared up. The official story is it'll take 100 years. I don't think so. I don't think they're ever going to be rid of it. They'll just pave it on over and say it's just natural for people in this part of the world to get cancer. Now then, let's see. We have Europe crop losses, record snow and cold with more in May. This is a YouTube video. Somebody was sending me a photo, a listener. It's snowing in Sheffield, England. Apparently, several parts of Scotland are getting snow showers, and it's going to continue there. And then finally, over in Minnesota near Duluth, they have issued an ice storm warning. And they're saying it's going to be glare ice, very, very dangerous. You should have your chains on the car. Now, this brings us back to Al Gore, who has put together yet another group to fight human-caused global warming. And they are calling for all of the countries of the world to cough up $600 billion a year for the next 2 decades to boost green energy deployment and energy efficiency equipment to fight global warming, even as we have a winter that continues to linger and linger and linger. Total cost, $15 trillion. That's why Gore came out with his sequel, The Inconvenient Sequel, which, by the way, is not doing very well at the box office. But they're still out there pushing this scam. Human-caused global warming, human-caused global warming. I'll let you in on a little secret. The human impact on the environment is microscopic compared to that of solar radiation, fluctuations, cosmic rays, which control the rate of cloud formation, and obviously the more clouds you have, the more sunlight bounces back into space, and the cooler the Earth becomes. CERN actually confirmed that. So, it's just more of the same nonsense. It's more of that same nonsense. Human-caused global warming. Now then, this is a cool idea. I actually like this one. Adidas is starting a new line of shoes that are partly made with recovered ocean trash. They're going to have them in the stores by the end of 2017. Each pair of shoes will use an average of 11 plastic bottles. This is a really, really cool idea because you probably heard that here in the Pacific Ocean, just north of us, trapped in that North Pacific gyre, is the Pacific trash pile. It's actually 2 of them. They bump up against each other. And a lot of people have been saying, what could we possibly do with it? Well, now it's going to be turned into a resource that can be harvested with a dredge and recycled. And I think that is a really, really good idea. Because that trash is very harmful to ocean life, including the ocean life that we like to eat. And that ocean life is already suffering from things like the Gulf oil disaster and Fukushima and overfishing. Let's be very honest. There is a problem with overfishing going on right now. Now, Claire has been talking about female genital mutilation, which is an ugly, ugly, ugly tradition. We were talking a couple of weeks ago where some doctor here in the United States has been arrested for doing this to girls without their permission. Well, over in Great Britain, UKIP now wants mandatory checks on young girls to make sure this is not being done to them. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And Moscow has now officially commented on the claims coming out of France that Macron's election was tampered with by Russia, And they're saying it's nothing but fake news. And yes, we know that's exactly what it is. That's all our corporate media knows how to do anymore. So they're out there, oh, anything bad, it's Russia, it's Russia, it's Russia. Now, speaking of Russia, story that just came out of Press TV, the U.S. is deploying F-35 fighter jets to Estonia, right on the doorstep of Russia, to send a signal. We're ready for you when you invade. And Putin's going to come back and say, I wasn't planning on invading. I have enough problems here in Russia. I don't need Europe's problems. I don't need the U.S. problems. And they're going to be flying these F-35s all over the region to familiarize pilots with the region, which I thought you could do that in a simulator. Basically, it's a tour. They're showing off the plane to say, see how mighty we are, to people who have not been reading the reports about all the problems the F-35 has. Very alarming story, this one out of Sputnik News. Officials are now advising citizens in Japan what to do if they get an alert that North Korea has launched a nuclear missile at Japan, and warning that citizens may have as little as 4 minutes to get to safety, ramping up the fear. Now you realize, now that THAAD is on station, now that the U.S. Armada is on station with its Aegis ships, if North Korea gets a missile through to Japan, doesn't matter if it's nuclear or not, if they get a rocket through to Japan, it will be seen as a failure of the American military. Remember during the second war in Iraq, and they were out there, we've got the Patriot, it's got a 95% success rate. And then after it was all over, experts came back and said, well, more like 50% really. And then further down the road, they came on back and said, well, actually, it was only about 30%. And they thought they were intercepting Scuds with biological weapons. Well, even if you hit one of those with a Patriot, its payload is still going to come down someplace. So there may be an issue there as well. Now let's talk about science and health here. The world's oldest person has just passed away, 117 years old. And basically, the lady, Emma Morano, was asked, how did you live so long? And she said, I ignored medical advice. Which, yeah, I think that might have something to do with it. Now, John Rappaport has a new article out where he likens the vaccine support as more in line with a cult and a religion than with actual science. And we've seen that with human-caused global warming as well. And it gets into this cult mentality because no matter how much negative information is surfacing regarding the harm and ineffectiveness of vaccines, the pro-vaxxers are still, we believe it's a post-truth world, we don't care what the actual facts are, we believe the vaccines are doing a good thing. And again, in times past, there were vaccines that seemed to work. A mild injected version of a disease would protect against the actual disease. But these days, the vaccines are being marketed to people who are never going to be exposed to those illnesses. Maybe that's why they're letting all these refugees and illegal immigrants with diseases into the country. Nothing like a good pandemic to drive up the medical industrial complex stock market. And we have, as a result of the open borders, we have illnesses now being reintroduced to the United States that have been eradicated for decades, if not generations. And that means our immune systems are not ready for them. Scabies, H1N1, at least one case of bubonic plague, and now leprosy. It's like we really are going back to the Dark Ages, where there are going to be these rotting people who look like zombies walking around the streets, and everyone's going to be screaming, unclean, unclean. But it's a belief system, like human-caused global warming, like private central banking. Now, Peggy Whitson, is an astronaut, and she just broke the U.S. spaceflight record of 534 days in space. And that's a long time to be in space. And I imagine, based on some of what we saw from the other long-duration astronauts, it will be very difficult for her to readjust to life back on Earth, but I'm sure it'll be worth it. And apparently Donald Trump was very impressed, and he made a phone call to her on the ISS from the Oval Office, and he said that he was more impressed with her than politicians. And I certainly second that notion as well. But congratulations to Peggy. She's done good, and I'm glad to see NASA getting back into space and less involved with rubber stamping Al Gore's propaganda. Now, we've been talking about Cassini, and it is nearing the end of its mission. It basically did a gravitational slingshot around Saturn's moon Titan that is sending it through the gap between the rings and the planet. Going to get some real close-ups. Unfortunately, the end of the orbit in September will be crashing into the atmosphere of Saturn. But the mission is pretty much over, and they got the information. And as a bonus, they managed to get some additional images of Titan itself. And I have to tell you, I am very curious about Titan. And I know a lot of people are talking about life on the other worlds and so forth, and I'm convinced that we found it on Mars with Viking, with Dr. Gilbert Levin's labeled release experiment. A lot of other scientists agree with that. But I think if you're really interested in finding extraterrestrial life, you go look in places where life as we know it cannot possibly exist. See, because NASA declared the LRE data on Viking null and void and went with the GCMS, and we've since learned the GCMS wouldn't have worked anyway. It was a false negative. All subsequent missions to Mars were not sterilized. And bacteria can be very, very rugged. They have a process called incestation, where if they're in a hostile environment, they literally create a hard shell around themselves. And they could very easily travel to Mars on the spaceship and adapt to the environment. So when we confirm the presence of life on Mars, which is inevitable at this point, it's going to be a necessary extra step. Is this really indigenous to Mars or something that hitched a ride from Earth? That's going to be very complex. Now, Titan represents a chance to see if life is forming in a truly alien environment. Instead of water, it's liquid methane. And the biochemistry is going to be so radically different. I think it would be worth another look at Titan. They're already planning missions to some of Saturn and Jupiter's moons that seem to have liquid water underneath an ice shell. They're going to be looking for life down there using technology they're developing down in Antarctica at a place called Lake Vostok, where there's a huge body of water that has been literally cut off from the outside world for thousands of years. And they're drilling down there with drills, everything sterilized. They don't want to contaminate the water, and they're looking for life down there as well. But I think if you want to validate that life is going to emerge in all circumstances, we ought to go back to Titan. Because I think most exobiologists are being very species chauvinists. They always talk about life as we know it. Let's go find life as we know it. Okay, well, that's all well and good. But I think that you're going to find self-organization in all kinds of chemistries, in all kinds of environments. Look at some of the extremophiles in our own world, such as the deep crust microbes or the fish swimming in freezing water at the Arctic pole, Arctic ice caps. They're already living in conditions that would be fatal to us. Or the life forms around those deep ocean thermal vents, they're based on a very different chemistry, one that would be very toxic to us. So if you have the basic raw materials and a source of energy and a fluid medium, sooner or later you're going to get that first self-replicating molecule. And that is all it takes to start. So that's why I'm curious about Titan. I think it would be really, really cool to send another lander there with a microscope and just scoop some of that liquid methane tar out of the oceans and just take a look and see if anything's swimming around in. Now, last week there was this power outage, and it hit San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles. Those were the main areas that were hit, and of course everybody was getting on the blog saying, oh, it's a cyber attack, it's terrorists and terrorists. What they're basically saying is that these power stations were brought down by a geomagnetic storm, because right now there is what is called the hole in the sun's corona. Now, this is a phenomenon that happens every once in a while, but it means the sun showers the Earth with much more energetic particles. And those particles will start playing games with the Earth's magnetosphere. And that, in turn, can induce wild voltage fluctuations in long transmission lines, those high-tension lines. And that, in turn, can cause blackouts. The great New York City blackout was finally traced back to the sun. And apparently our power distribution systems are not robust enough quite yet to deal with this kind of an issue. But it does happen. Space weather is a reality. Okay, now then, let's see. What else are we going to talk about? U.S. Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren has given Donald Trump an F for his first 100 days. I would probably say D- is more accurate here. But that 100-day thing, it's kind of an arbitrary limit. It doesn't really mean anything. It's not a deadline for things to be done. And I think too much emphasis was placed on it. But certainly, to date, Donald Trump has been a tremendous disappointment to those of us who supported him, especially in those two areas of paramount interest to the American people, the economy and the wars. And the economy is still moving forward toward a lockup or a collapse, and we're still on board the war agenda. If anything, it seems like the war agenda has accelerated. And we're obviously very concerned about a shooting war in North Korea as early as tomorrow. Well, actually, it's already the morning of Wednesday over there in the Koreas. And this thing actually could spin completely out of control. Now then, Saudi Arabia is the 12th worst country for women, and yet somehow received a spot on the United Nations Women's Rights Commission. Seems a little weird to me, but that's what happened over there. More ramping up of the booga booga. Secretary of Homeland Security General John Kelly said he believes President Trump will be dealing with a nuclear North Korea able to strike America by the end of his first term. Okay, let's go on back and ask, why would North Korea strike the United States knowing it would mean the destruction of their entire nation? And the answer is they wouldn't. North Korea wants nuclear weapons as a deterrent to being invaded, because North Korea is looking at all the U.S. invasions, overthrows, coups d'etats, regime changes of the last 16 years, and they all have one feature in common. These countries didn't have the means to discourage a foreign invader. The U.S. is getting butch, whooping on defenseless countries. The United States has, if not the world's largest nuclear arsenal, one of the world's largest nuclear arsenals. Nobody is going to attack us without a really good reason, because it's national suicide. But they're still out there pushing this thing. Oh, it's nuclear. Saddam has nukes. Assad has gas. North Korea is going crazy. Somebody wrote on in and said, well, you know, your thing about no first strike would make sense if Kim Jong-un wasn't such a complete nutcase paranoid goofball. And my response to that, and your response to that, should be everything you think you know about North Korea and Kim Jong-un has been handed to you by the same people who told you Saddam had nuclear weapons. And you need to keep that in mind. The corporate media is not there to tell you the truth. The corporate media is there to sell you things. The next car, the next fashion, the next vaccine, the next candidate, the next policy, the next tax, the next war. That's what they're in the job to do. And they're trying to sell us another war. And I think a primary reason they're pushing on North Korea right now is the realization that nobody really believed that nonsense about Assad gassing his own people. And I'm very concerned about a false flag of some kind to trigger this war into moving forward here. Okay, apparently Labour over in Great Britain is trashing the Tory plan for a hard Brexit. The debate has now moved away from will Brexit go forward or not into whether it's a hard Brexit, meaning we're going to leave now, or a soft Brexit, meaning we're going to do it very, 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 very slowly. And obviously the Remainers who are not going to get their Remain, they're pushing for the soft Brexit. So there's a lot of turmoil over there as well. And certainly most of the ordinary people of Europe, just like they don't want a new world war, they're sick and tired of the EU. The European Union was supposed to be all about free trade, free travel. That was it. And Brussels has turned into this absolutely tyrannical, unaccountable ruling body. And the people of Europe are very unhappy. It's almost like the Nazis won World War II, and they're still under that dictatorship. And they do not like it. Okay, somebody just put up an article at the website from the Discovery Channel. Tests prove depleted uranium scrambles the chromosomes. And as I mentioned before, one of the big secrets being kept by the U.S. military is if you are a veteran of any war zone where depleted uranium munitions were being used, and you get a lungful of that dust, there's a good chance when you try and have a family, you're going to have a severely malformed child. And that is a terrible, terrible sacrifice to ask anybody to make. We'll be right back with the last segment of our program. And aloha America, welcome back to the show. And we're talking about how the job of the corporate media is to sell you things, sell you ideas, keep you loyal to the corporations, keep the money flowing from you to the money junkies. And I think this is a really good example here because I'm looking at this article over at signsoftheTime.net. And it's talking about how the corporate media is now trying to push the idea that eating unprocessed food is a dangerous cult. You're risking your health if you're not eating fully processed foods. Now, we know that in the latest psychological diagnostic manual, where they've taken virtually every normal human behavior and turned it into a mental illness, they actually have defined the desire to eat healthy food as a mental illness called orthorexia nervosa. And so this is obviously pandering. They want you to go on buying the food product of these corporations, which are filled with all kinds of chemicals and fillers and even chemicals that make you want to eat more. And so they're out there with the corporate media saying it's a dangerous cult to want to eat clean, organic, unprocessed foods, and you're endangering your health. And it really is an absurd thing for them to be saying, but then that's what they're paid to do. And we are seeing media attacks on those who question the safety of vaccines. Just smear jobs. They don't have any research except that one CDC report, which has now been exposed as being a fraud. The CDC's report that said there is no link between vaccines and autism has been exposed as a fraud by its chief author, William Thompson, who came on out and said they cherry-picked the data. And then we had that other gentleman, former CDC official, went public on video saying that in 17 different cases, when they were running studies to see if there was a link between vaccines and autism, 17, they found the links and then they changed the protocol. They kept trying over and over again, changing the protocol until they got the desired result. And that vaccine injury court, that is the catch-all for all vaccine-injured people, relies on that original CDC report in order to deny any support to the parents of vaccine-damaged children. It's all about protecting the corporations and the corporations' profits. And it is obscene to see it happening. I don't think it's a mental illness to want to eat natural food. And again, I'm a farm kid. You know, we used to go, it's lunchtime. All right, let's go out to the garden. and we'd get what we were going to eat there, or in the barn, milk the cow, go to the chicken coop, get some eggs. We weren't a dangerous cult. That was normal life. But in corporate fascist America, they want you to have to pay a corporation for absolutely everything you need, including now water. And next, it'll be air. Oh, anybody who wants to breathe the air in the atmosphere, they're a sicko. You need your bottled and canned and flavored air. It really is the height of absurdity. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here, get things done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay skeptical, stay informed, make good choices, share what you know with everyone you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.